I would say that our feelings are not random, that they tell us about our core needs and desires.
You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. In this series, we'll explore a variety of well-being topics with experts from the university community in physical, emotional, nutritional, and financial health. Join us, and together we'll discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient. I'm your host, Jakob Hester, and Happy New Year. Today, my guest is Amy Rodquist-Kodet. She's a National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach with UK HR Health and Wellness. She also has a master's in holistic health education and is a certified aromatherapist. Today, we'll be talking about how naming our feelings can help us identify our needs and what we can do with that information to address those needs. Welcome, Amy.
Hey, Jacob. So glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on. So before we get started, how are you doing?
How am I doing? I heard somebody on the radio the other day, and the host was like, "How are you?" And the person was like, "I'm pandemic okay." I was like, yeah, that seems appropriate. Like, hanging in. Some wild and crazy times.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it. I'm pandemic okay. You're kind of recognizing how it's not you're sort of that previous normal. And you recognize the things that are going on around you as well. So that's an extra way to put that. I'm kind of glad you brought that up.
Yeah, pandemic okay. Hashtag 2020, 2021. Oh, it's a unique time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of kicking off a new year here. So tell the listeners a little more about yourself as a person and what you do.
Well, as you said, health coach and wellness specialist for UK Health and Wellness. In my side worlds, I do a lot with aromatherapy, which is kind of fun. I am a mama to a teenager and 2 twin toddlers. I was thinking the other day, there's a lot of similarities between parenting a 13-year-old and 2 one-year-olds. A lot of the same techniques work on both ages. So that's been a wild discovery. I'm married to somebody who is also a mental health specialist. So our idea of a good time or a date night is talking about neuroscience or relationships. So we're kind of weird that way. We both are geeks when it comes to just overall well-being and mental health. And, I find that I think I like to do things quiet now, and also I kind of have two volume switches. I'm kind of wild and wear a lot of costumes and love to be energetic and zestful. And I also I find as I'm getting older, I'm liking some quieter activities too, like gardening, and I'm a long distance swimmer. So things that offer some solitude in the midst of these difficult days feel really important too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the costumes there, because that was going to be a little fun fact that I had. So over the pandemic, especially in the summer, we had our kind of regular staff meetings, and to spice it up and to make some kind of fun out of it, since we were on Zoom calls all day long, Amy and I both had quite a streak going of days that we wore costumes to our staff meetings. And we never told anybody in advance what we were doing. So it became kind of a game of what we were going to show up wearing. And we started bringing in our backgrounds into the mix as well. So it was fun to have a compatriot as we did that, and kind of lighten the days for our coworkers too. So that was pretty funny.
Seriously. And I would just like to say that our costume range is deep. Like, I'm happy neither of us purchased any costume paraphernalia. It was all within, our costume chest, so to speak. And there had to have been at least 10, 15 different costume outfits or ensembles. So pretty proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're out there listening and you're looking for a way to spice up those Zoom meetings, start doing costumes and start incorporating your backgrounds into them. The creativity that comes with it was actually pretty fun. And that was something that made me really look forward to these meetings, when typically people don't look forward to meetings that much. But when you're not seeing your coworkers, plus you're adding this sort of fun element to it, it made me really look forward to those every other week.
I love it. We should be wearing costumes right now. I wish we had thought of that. But yeah, I am unfortunately not in a costume.
Yeah, if we were doing a video podcast, that would have been pretty good.
Totally.
Yeah, so kind of diving into our topic a little bit. Recently, my wife and I watched A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Tom Hanks movie about Mr. Rogers. And in it, there was an actual quote from Mr. Rogers that really stuck with me. And he said, anything that's human is mentionable. Anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. So I'll read that one more time. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. So as I've ruminated on this quote, I feel like it ties in really well to the last conversation I had with Cindy Bowling about burnout, and actually alluded to this a little bit with my conversation before that with Karen Bryland McNeese. And I know you've kind of presented on this topic before on sort of name it to tame it, and identifying our feelings so that we can start to address needs. So I kind of want to begin there with this conversation, since I didn't go into a lot of detail in the previous 2 episodes about this. So first off, how does that quote resonate with you?
I love that quote. I've heard it before. I even had it in my journal for a while. I think it's counterintuitive, right? I think sometimes we think that if we talk about our sadness, or if we talk about our jealousy, or we express our fear and anxiety, that somehow it's going to consume us, or we're going to drown in our sadness. And it's really the paradox that the research really suggests that that's the opposite, that when we are able to say what is true for us emotionally, Dr. Brene Brown's research on shame really points to this, that the one thing that shame can't withstand is this safe space. So when we're able to talk about our difficult feelings and name them in an environment where people can respond to us with compassion and empathy, the shame diminishes, sometimes even evaporates, and we're able to work through those difficult feelings that can really transform us in some powerful ways.
I think it's important to define feelings and distinguish those from emotion as well. So what are sort of the definitions and differences between feelings and emotions?
Ooh, good question. Okay, so emotions are really associated with body reactions. So you can measure emotions in the body, in the blood. So we've got neurotransmitters and hormones that are released in the brain with emotions. Feelings are the conscious experiences of the emotions. So what does that all mean? So quite simply, emotions can't be changed. They are the knee-jerk reaction to when we are triggered by something. And no matter if it's joy or complete despair and loss, our body plays out the emotion in just a matter of microseconds, versus feelings last a lot longer and are in response to whatever the emotion is. So for instance, here's a little vulnerable but truthful example of this. So just about a week and a half ago, I was driving at night. I tend to have a little bit of a lead foot. I was driving a little fast and I hit a speed trap. And immediately I saw the police officer. I saw like the squad car just sitting there, and I was like, ugh! And that emotional reaction, I felt my palms get sweaty. My heart started to race. I wanted to kind of throw up. I throw on the brake, right? That is all emotion. It cannot be changed. It isn't right or wrong. It is automatic, and we have no control over it. Feelings then are what take over after we've had that physiological response. And that's where I'm just like, Amy Irene, what are you doing? I can't believe you were going so fast. Ugh, if you get a ticket, I'm going to lose my mind. So that's all the feeling in response to the emotion. I am happy to say I was not pulled over. I did not receive a speeding ticket, but I think it breaks down in really tangible ways. Emotions get triggered first. They're in the body, And then feelings get triggered, usually about the emotions, and they are in the mind and sometimes the body. But they can last for many, many minutes, hours, days, weeks, sometimes, depending on what it's in response to.
That distinction, I think, is important as we continue to talk about this subject, because both of these things we're going to have happen. We're going to experience emotions. We're going to have feelings, and knowing kind of the nuanced difference between those, because sometimes I think we catch ourselves using them interchangeably when they do have a slight distinction between them, particularly emotions being sort of that physiological response that's happening in the body, whereas feelings are then sort of what's kind of going on in your head for a longer period of time after as well.
Exactly. Well, you're right. And in English, we don't differentiate the two. Feelings and emotions can be interchanged and people know exactly what you're talking about. But you're right. There is a distinction there, not something to get overly hung up about if you call a feeling an emotion or vice versa, but definitely important to notice and pay attention to.
And I think the difference between them too is that emotions, because they're natural responses, you're not going to stop those necessarily. Those are inherent in us, and they're there for a lot of times for a good reason.
Bingo.
Whereas feelings, we have more control over those, particularly how we frame those, and those types of things. And that's kind of what I want to talk about a little bit more. So you alluded to it a little bit already. So tell us a little more about the importance of naming our feelings and the research that is behind it.
Oh man, this is the part that I geek out on, because I could read about what's happening in the body and the brain till the day is long. So there's some really cool research happening. If you want to do a deep dive, I would say take a peek into Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research. He's at the UCLA, and all of his research is really about when we can name a troubling feeling, we can calm the body. So just being able to get a handle on what we're feeling and naming it allows us to actually cultivate that internal relaxation response. That parasympathetic nervous system calms down and we're able to relax. Another really good book that I just recently read, it was called Dancing on the Tightrope. That's by Dr. Beth Kurland. And she comes at feelings and emotions a little bit differently, and how we are often wired to avoid what's unpleasant, right? And we seek out the pleasant. It's just a natural part of human nature. And that happens with emotions and feelings too. So what the research suggests, of really fascinating stuff, is that when we can accept our emotions and feelings instead of, kind of avoiding it, we can increase our ability to be resilient, to calm our bodies. So that's some really cool stuff that's happening, and points to when we're trying to avoid those difficult feelings and emotions, we are actually increasing our distress. We're increasing our inflexibility. We're increasing our anxiety and depression, and we're diminishing our well-being. And it's kind of counterintuitive, because I think we think if we can just lock it out and make those difficult feelings go away, kind of fake it till you make it, you're going to feel better. And really the research suggests that just isn't the case.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is sort of going in with that vulnerability, and rather than leaning away from some of these difficult feelings that you may have, you're leaning into those. Does that kind of sound like a good synopsis of what you just said?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes beyond emotion. So for a long time, I was a tobacco treatment specialist, worked with folks to really help quit tobacco. So some really interesting research by Dr. Judson Brewer suggests that when we turn towards our cravings, specifically with smoking, we're less likely to engage in addictive behaviors. Like when we can accept the fact that we're having a craving, we can feel the craving in our body, we diminish the craving. Or some cool research happening with folks experiencing chronic pain, that when we can turn into into what does the pain feel like? Is it a jabbing? Is it just kind of a chronic achiness? We're actually able to release some of the pain. So that research was done at Wake Forest School of Medicine and Neurobiology. Really, really interesting stuff about what's happening in the brain when we can tune into the pain itself instead of just numb it out or pretend that it's not happening.
Yeah, it feels counterintuitive to accept and sit with these things rather than try to avoid them and sort of hope that they go away. And the application behind this is pretty broad, it sounds like. I mean, you brought up a few different topics there between smoking and pain and those types of things. That's really interesting to see how broad this is. And so that kind of brings me to my next point, which is I feel like this is a really foundational practice for resilience. Would you agree?
Hands down. I think paying attention to feelings and what is happening like in the body and the brain is one of the most powerful ways we can take care of ourselves, that we can bounce back from emotional pain, physical pain. It is, I think, a core element of resilience. And like you said, it is counterintuitive because we want to avoid it, but the very things that we attempt to do to avoid it, to numb out, to disassociate from the pain is actually causing that pain, emotionally or physically, to kind of bounce back louder, almost like it grabs a megaphone and turns up the volume.
Is there any benefit to naming the positive feelings as well?
100%. So some of the work that was done by the late Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, he is the founder of nonviolent communication. And what he suggests is that any time you are experiencing a positive feeling, that means a need is getting met. And any time that you're experiencing a difficult negative feeling, that means a need is not getting met. And so what we know, and this really plays out in the research, kind of in neurobiology with Dr. Rick Hansen, who's a neurologist, is that when we can realize and notice the positive feelings that are happening, we can actually grow them. We can create a new neural pathway in the brain to experience more of them. But this takes a ton of practice because the brain is wired to look for the difficult feelings, right? It's that whole part of our caveman brain that is wired to survive. And so threat is far more, I think, what could you say? Like threat has a more lucrative quality in the brain. So there's Dr. Hansen suggests that a difficult feeling or a difficult situation sticks to our brain like Velcro, where the positive ones slide right off like Teflon. And so it is a really powerful practice to be able to notice when those positive feelings are happening and to savor them and to grow them. And that's where practices like gratitude can really come into play because research by Dr. Martin Seligman, for instance, at the University of Pennsylvania suggests that when we have a regular gratitude practice, we can literally change the neural pathways in our brain, which is some exciting stuff, but it definitely needs to happen on an intentional, almost like habit level.
It's really interesting to think about how our brains sort of cling to the negative, whereas you mentioned like sort of the Teflon idea with some of those more positive ones. And it actually makes me think about the movie Inside Out. Mm-hmm. We chose this movie on purpose for a Wellbeing Week a couple of years ago to do a screening for some of our employees and their families. And that kind of visual shows up really well in that movie when you have the character Sadness starting to touch all of these memories. And every time she touches these memories, it starts to kind of spread out within the brain there. And I think that obviously is kind of the foundational research behind that.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, there's some really, really cool stuff happening. Like the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Dr. Richie Davidson has been studying mindfulness in the brain, and he specifically looked at lifelong meditators, both folks that meditate kind of for personal reasons as well as professional meditators, I guess you could call them, like Buddhist monks, and folks that have spent a lifetime meditating. And what happens in their brain is pretty exciting. How mindfulness can be used as a way to grow genuine experiences of positivity, of joy, of contentment. So I think that's some of the most exciting stuff that's been happening in science over the last 15 plus years is actually now we can see the parts of our brain that light up when we focus on different emotions, different feelings, and kind of grow these practices like gratitude, savoring, mindfulness, all of which can really help us to live a more joyful life.
So I want to use that mindfulness to sort of jump off from here. So we're living in the moment, we're feeling something, something's happened, we have this sort of stimulus, external again, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, and how we start to respond to it. So how do we go about naming our feeling then?
So this is something that I find can be really, really helpful is to literally print out kind of feeling words. And we've got a list through Health and Wellness that I've created, because what we know and what Dr. Lieberman's research suggests is that when we can get a more broad handle on what we're feeling, not just feeling sad or mad or glad, right? I mean, those are all fine feelings, but maybe we need to branch into, maybe it's more anger or anxiety or jealousy or apathy, right? So being able to get a little bit deeper into what it is that you're exactly feeling. That's usually the first step. And how looking at a feelings list can really help us do that. Kind of massage out like, oh, it's really this versus this. So once you kind of can name the feeling, then what I find is really helpful is to drop down one step deeper, which is around needs. Because as Dr. Marsha Rosenberg suggests, is that, that negative feeling is the first step, and then below that feeling is a need that we have, a universal need that every person on the planet, we all have these basic universal needs, and we're all just walking around trying to get our needs met. And so when we can figure out, based on the difficult feeling, what need isn't getting met, then we have a really, really important kind of realization that happens that we can notice like, okay, I'm really feeling a need for autonomy or for freedom or for harmony or whatever the need is. And then we can actually begin to meet our need instead of trying to numb out or use a strategy that really isn't very helpful in meeting our need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of jumping back to the beginning of that response, talking about putting a more kind of in-depth look on those words. So instead of using these very, very broad words like mad or sad that are sort of more generalized, actually drilling down to more specific words and having more of those to pinpoint that, especially in times of overwhelm, because I feel like that's probably a time where you're going to default back to mad or sad or something like that. So having a list of those words that are more in depth can really be helpful in helping you drill down into what it specifically is that you're feeling. And then that helps you with those next steps you talked about, which are identifying sort of the core need that you need met, and then how to actually meet that need.
Absolutely. And the part that I get hung up on, because I can talk a good game, like here, name your feeling and then drop into needs and then you're set to go. I'm usually the last one to the party when it comes to recognizing that I'm really mad about something or I'm really jealous. My husband will kind of bristle and be like, Aim, like, whoa, what's going on? You doing okay? And I'm usually like, I'm fine. Everything's great, right? And I kind of grit my teeth. And so a practice for me, especially during the pandemic, I've found is that when I can just acknowledge that I am experiencing a difficult emotion, a difficult feeling, then I can welcome it a little bit more, right? Because there's some powerful research that suggests that, so this is by Judson Brewer at George Mason University. He talks about this idea of welcoming difficult emotions to the table as messengers, right? So when we can welcome anger and really invite it in, have a seat at the table, because anger is there to tell us about something. Maybe it's there to tell us that we care about something passionately and deeply, or areas where we may be feeling powerless, or panic, right? Panic usually tells us about what we fear. Laziness, apathy. I don't know about you, but during the pandemic, I have just felt like low energy. And that's usually there to let us know we're burned out, that we need a break, that we're feeling the demands and pressures. So just allowing those difficult emotions to show up, to recognize it, and to realize, I wonder, get curious, right? Like, I wonder what this difficult feeling is here to tell me. And when we get curious about that, then it doesn't feel so threatening, so overwhelming, or even so shaming.
I really like that you brought in curiosity there, because I feel like that's really important in how we discover these core needs. So that kind of brings me to my next point is, how do we get from this feeling that we've now identified, we've put some more concise language and precise language on this. How do we now get from that to what that underlying need is?
Yeah, so this is like where the rubber hits the road. How do we use it in day-to-day life? And that's something I really care a lot about as a coach, is like helping people develop practices that allow them to use all of this good research and science in the day-to-day life, right? So I got a couple ideas on this one. Number one is simply ABCs. So A is just to acknowledge the difficult feeling, to name it. So looking at your feelings list, feeling what you feel, calling it out, labeling it, and then giving yourself an invitation to just take a few deep breaths, right? Because we know that the breath is a powerful way to reset our parasympathetic nervous system and bring about our natural calm response. So that's the B, is the breath. And then the C is to choose, to figure out like, okay, if you're feeling a sense of exhaustion, like, what is the next smallest choice that you can make, the most simple, doable action that you can do in the next moment to meet your need, right? So maybe how can you offer yourself a bit of rest? What might it look like to care for yourself gently? Because sometimes in the moment, you can't do this big sweeping gesture, right? You can't just go out and like, get a massage or take a trip, right? So thinking about what's the next smallest thing you can do in the moment to care for yourself, to meet your need, and to really grow an abundance of tools for yourself. In the moment, it's sometimes really difficult to think about, all right, what would be a gentle gesture? So I even have like on my phone, I've got a list in the notes section of like little things that take me less than 5 minutes of ways that I can care for myself. So sometimes that just means like a walk to the mailbox, giving myself some tea, washing my hands with a really delicious smelling soap and putting some lotion on, calling my best friend. Like, there's a variety of things. These aren't going to like change the trajectory of your life, but these small little compassionate kindnesses that we can offer ourselves help us to reset and move on to the next thing that we need to do.
I've used the app Headspace quite a bit, and there is a practice that I've done regularly on there. It's a noting practice. And so I think it really ties in the first two steps of what you just talked about, the A and the B. So that acknowledgement and that using the breath. Mm-hmm. And so it's basically a meditation practice where you, when things arise in your mind, you gently just note them as thinking or feeling. And in that moment, it gives you sort of that clarity on what is arising, and you're acknowledging it, you're welcoming it, and then you're sort of letting it go. And I think that's sort of like the very basic of this as well, being mindful in the moment and really recognizing what it is. And then you can kind of go a step further from there, especially if it's something that's ruminating around. Then you can go a step further and say, what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling is this. So if this is coming up so many times, what can I do? Why is this coming up? What can I do to change it?
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. Well, and that really kind of points me to the second practice, which is about recognizing your needs, right? So I mentioned it before, this idea from Dr. Rosenberg's work that we all have these basic human needs. And what we know is that even though we all have these needs, based on different circumstances in our life, different times and things that we're responsible for, we're going to start to notice patterns of needs that we have that are continuously not getting met, right? So the needs that my partner has that feel really important for him might look really different than the needs that I have. And so when we're disconnected or distracted from our most core needs, we often are trying to fulfill them in other ways, right? So that's the part where like overeating, overdrinking, overspending, doom scrolling, gossiping, ruminating, like all of these are ways we're trying to care for ourselves, but we usually use to kind of numb out. And so this idea of like, when you get clear about what needs are consistently not being met for you, you can take your power back and begin to figure out strategies that actually help you to meet some of those needs. So, for example, a need for belonging or a need for playfulness or harmony. For me lately, I have a really big need for freedom and autonomy, right? Like, so I've got these like 2 twin babies that I love more than anything in the world. There's a lot of monotony, a lot of like just core basic needs that I have to meet for them, right? The feeding, the changing, the playing, which is awesome and also can be kind of mind-numbing sometimes, right? And so this idea of like, I'm trying to find ways that I can carve out time for myself so that I can meet some of those needs, that I can care for my own needs and take more gentle care of myself so that then I can go back and meet the needs of the people I love the most in life, or meet the needs of my health coaching clients, or whatever the case may be, right? So the need for harmony is another really big one for me. So beauty and peace and structure. So sometimes that manifests in just trying to make sure the kitchen is clean before I go to bed at night. Because when I wake up in the morning, I feel better when, the house is just a little bit more put back together again. So that's what I mean about kind of coming up with some tangible strategies to support yourself when you notice these needs that again and again keep kind of popping up for you, that you want to pay more attention to. And I've got a worksheet too I can send to you, Jacob, that helps people kind of figure out, what are your top 5 needs and what are things that you can do daily, weekly, monthly to help meet those needs, big and little ways that can really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that. We can post that in the show notes so that people can dive in a little deeper, because we know that these feelings that we're having and then those underlying needs are going to be very specific to you. So we're talking about this in broader terms, but we recognize that each individual is going to have a different experience, a different feeling, a different need, those types of things. So we want to give you the tools so that you can best address those yourself. But obviously, we're always here to help support you in that journey as well. So that's why we want to make sure that you have these types of things available to you and at your disposal so that you can use these tools rather than us just kind of talk about them.
Absolutely. And you know what? I was thinking about costumes, and I think costumes for me, and maybe this is for you too, I don't know, but like, so another big need of mine is expression, right? This idea for creativity and novelty. And I think costumes are a way of meeting needs to offer that kind of like joy and creativity. And I don't know, it's fun to think about the things we naturally gravitate towards as strategies to meet our needs and to notice, okay, which needs are we like effectively meeting, and maybe which strategies are we using that really aren't making the mark, that aren't just hitting the bullseye. And when we can figure out consistent ways to meet them, boy, do we get a lot of power back.
Yeah, I think that is true for me as well. And I think that's why I started doing that at the beginning, because there were so many things that were out of our control.
Yeah.
And that was such a small step that I could take, that it was something that was within my control, and it was something that I could do that was creative and I could have some fun with. And then I could share that with other people so that they can kind of get some joy, even if it is literally just laughing at me for putting on something extremely goofy.
Totally. And we have people on our team where that would be a nightmare to like dress up in costume, right? So that's what I mean about finding strategies that work for you. Just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else. So really personalizing these tools that can support you makes a world of difference.
Yeah, exactly. And they can look a lot of different ways.
Right on.
So how do we get better at both naming our feelings and identifying our needs?
I think it's practice. I think it's like building the muscle in the more you use it, and just even having the awareness can make a big difference. I find that language can make a big difference too. So instead of saying, I feel overwhelmed, even saying like a part of me feels overwhelmed, or instead of I am angry, this idea that it's like somehow it's your whole persona that's angry. It's really a part of you feels angry. And just that little distinction can make a really big difference on being able to move through the feeling and get past it instead of feeling stuck in it.
So is that basically kind of separating yourself from the feeling in the way that like, this is not who I am. It's not necessarily a part of me. It's just something that I'm experiencing in this moment.
Absolutely. I've heard people talk about like the metaphor of feelings and weather, right? So feelings are weather. They shift and they change. And so when we can think about our feelings as like not these permanent states that are going to last forever and ever, although when we're in the midst of them, especially the really deep, gripping ones, it can feel like that. But to be able to separate and being like, I am not my feeling. I feel this way, but I am not the rage. I am not the overwhelm. I feel overwhelm. I feel rage. Or part of me does, at least.
Yeah, that feels really powerful in helping you sort of move through it. Because like when you're going through those darkest, toughest times, what's the old quote? If you're going through hell, keep on going.
I know.
And I think
Winston
that might
Churchill,
be kind of a way to keep you going in that point.
Absolutely. And I think it helps too I like a part of me feels that way, because we can hold different feelings at the same time. So maybe if any of the listeners have experienced a loss recently, part of us can feel this deep grief and another part of us can feel relief. We can experience deep joy in the moment, and we can also experience pangs of regret. So that's why I like this, even that simple language of parts of me feel these different ways, because it allows for what may feel like contrasting feelings to be held together at the same time. And that really gives us more power as well to kind of experience the fullness of our emotion, not just all joy or all sadness, because there's a lot of other things in the mix as well.
Yeah, so far we've really just been talking about an awareness piece for the most part, in the sense that we've really only named and identified at this point. We haven't really taken any concrete actions towards those needs necessarily. So to me, I think of this connection to emotional intelligence, which is our ability to understand, use, and manage our emotions in positive ways. And so on one side of this is that awareness piece with self-awareness and social awareness. Is there a connection here with what we're sort of talking about in this idea of emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I think it allows us to offer empathy and compassion to others when we're able to experience our own feelings and have practice, setting boundaries and moving through the difficult emotions. We can then recognize that in others and allow ourselves to, set a boundary if need be, as well as offer those deeper connecting pieces of compassion, kindness, generosity that I think really only happens when we can emotionally care for ourselves first, so that then we have the capacity, the bandwidth to be able to reach out and care for those that we work with or that we're in relationship with personally or professionally.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well about reaching out to others and how we do that and how we use this framework for connecting with them. Instead of just asking somebody a really broad question, you can almost, I think, drill down your questions as well to help them move past whatever it is that they may be feeling.
Yeah, and I think the more we practice with some of these tools, the better we get at recognizing the feelings in others. I do this with my toddlers all the time, even though they're not very verbal yet, right? They're only like 14 months. But, somebody was having a meltdown just last night, just all on the floor, totally losing it. And instead of me saying like, Milo, honey, stop, you're fine, right? Which is totally passing over the feelings of this little dude. I said to him like, Milo, are you feeling frustrated right now? You want to reach that, it was a water bottle, you want to reach that water bottle, but you can't reach it. Oh, I bet that feels really frustrating. And he just kind of looked at me, right? But the idea that we can begin to put language on this for some of our kids can be really, really helpful. There's like feelings and needs magnets that you can buy on Amazon, that you can like make sentences on the refrigerator, like I feel, I need. So being able to practice these feelings and needs language can really be helpful. Or I use it with my coaching clients all the time. I kind of make a little empathy guess of like, wow, that sounds super frustrating. Or wow, was that overwhelming? And you kind of put it out there for folks and then you let them unpack it. Yeah, it was overwhelming, but it was also satisfying, or, and so even when we kind of reflect back the feelings that we hear other people saying, it gives them a chance to kind of try it on for themselves and kind of come to a better understanding that they might be needing in the moment.
I feel like this ties really well back to Mr. Rogers as well, because I feel like he was the master at this, especially when dealing with children. And the way that you just described dealing with that moment and that meltdown was very much, I had this image of Mr. Rogers, and I obviously I know you and know what you look like. So I'm kind of envisioning you sitting there with a sweater, having this interaction with your child. But yeah. It sounds funny in my head, the way that I'm visualizing it, but I think that's really important because we can do that with not only our children, we can do that with ourselves, we can do that with our friends, we can do that with our coworkers. And really how we talk about those things and how we frame those becomes very important in how we destigmatize some of these things as well.
It's revolutionary when we allow everybody's feelings to be okay. Now, granted, there's a difference between the difficult feeling and then maybe an action that's tied to the feeling, right? So I can say to my toddler, honey, I know you're feeling frustrated. I know you're feeling angry right now, but it's not okay to hit, so we're going to move over here right now and step away from your brother, right? So it's kind of this idea of okaying the feeling and then also setting a boundary around the action that maybe isn't so okay. But we never, right, what I tried to not do is to make the feeling bad. Because what happens when we feel bad about feeling bad, that's when the shame happens. That's when we have to feel like Faker McFakerton, like we have to put a smile on our face and everything has to be fine. And we let those difficult feelings just kind of fester until we explode. So I think it's a revolutionary act to okay the feelings, to let whatever the feeling is come up, whether that's for kids or adults. And also, I think allowing people to have their own feelings. This is the lesson that I get for parenting a teenager. She has some very strong feelings about being in quarantine, very strong feelings about not being able to see her friends right now. Hard stuff. And so to allow her the disappointment, the anger, the fear, to allow that to be there without me trying to fix that for her or, myself getting all caught up in it. It is hard, and it is a practice that I've been working on and will continue to work on for a long time. But it's really freeing when we can separate out the feelings that other people are having, allow them to have it, and know that that doesn't need to be our experience too. We don't have to get pulled into the enmeshment, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of leaning towards the second half of emotional intelligence, which is that management piece. So we have the awareness piece of self and essentially others on one side, and then we have the management of self and those relationships on the other side. And I think that's kind of where we're headed with this. We're not going to talk a whole lot about emotional intelligence, but our friends over in HR training and development actually do trainings on this. So they actually have one coming up on January 19th that you can sign up for. And they have another one in March and another one in June as well. So if that's something that's interesting to you and you want to dive further on that, definitely go see our friends in HR training and development for that. But kind of moving into that management piece, what do we do with this information now that we have it? How do we actually go about addressing these needs that we've now identified?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit, but I think really identifying the core needs that keep coming up for you, the needs that you notice again and again aren't regularly being met for you, and then coming up with strategies, tangible ways to care for yourself and to meet that need. So to notice, if you have a need for play, right? My husband has a really strong need for playfulness and for humor and laughter. So how do you strategize spontaneity in your life? What does it look like to prioritize a need for yourself, and then getting clear on that strategy, that action that actually helps to cultivate that need. So what helps to enliven you, what helps to help you laugh. And when maybe that's watching crazy cat videos on YouTube or making time every day to find joy. Those are tangible ways of meeting your need. It's the reason that I try to make my bed every day and make sure I don't have dishes in the sink before I go to bed. That is a strategy to try to meet the need for harmony in my space. And so those are just my strategies. So it's so personalized, but think for yourself, what is one small thing you can do daily to meet your need? What's another bigger thing you can do weekly to meet your need? And write it down, because it's hard to think of them in the moment. But this can be a really, really powerful thing to prioritize your needs so that you don't find yourself running on empty and numbing out or finding strategies that don't actually work.
So is there a difference in the short versus sort of the long-term addressing of these needs? So I kind of think about using HALT as a way to understand those needs as well. So are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Or are you tired? And that's a really basic way, I think, to think about this. But does that feel like a short term, when you're really in the thick of it type of practice? And then kind of a follow-up question to that, what do we do in the long term then?
I love HALT. I think it's very tangible, right? And I think it helps to incorporate the physical needs as well as the kind of the emotional needs. So any little tool like that can be really powerful. And I think long term, it's around practices. It's around daily habits that can really support you when you need it most, right? So it's having some sort of meditation or mindfulness practice that can really work with our brains to promote resilience and kind of self-efficacy. It's working with our emotion, having the gratitude, practicing our needs, savoring these good experiences, having ways of connecting in real ways with other people, personally and professionally, kind of figuring out, I know I sound like a broken record, right? But like, what are the needs that are continuously coming up for you? And how do you align those needs with daily actions that fill up your need bucket?
Are there any good universal practices that you would recommend for meeting needs, or is it very dependent upon the specific need or like the specific individual?
It is really person to person dependent. So for instance, a couple of years ago, a neighbor asked me to do this Couch to 5K training program. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And if anyone knows me, they know I'm not a runner, but I really wanted to like meet that need for community, and we were going to train together. And I thought, oh, this will be easy because I don't have access to a pool all the time. And so, all I need is a pair of running shoes. Jacob, I hated every single minute of it. I mean, I liked meeting with her, but my hips hurt. I had to go to the chiropractor. My knee was sore for months. So this is the example of like a strategy that was not meeting the need, right? I wanted to feel energized and really connected, and all it left me feeling was sore and totally discouraged, but I'm so stinking stubborn. I kept going, right? So for me, feeling energized isn't going for a run, but for me, it's more of like a swim or going to a Zumba class. But for somebody else, that's going to look really different. So it's really individualized, but that's what I mean by paying attention to the strategy, the thing that you're going to do. Is it really hitting the mark? Sometimes we do these things that we think are going to make us feel better, like looking through Facebook or Instagram. We're longing for that connection, but we get off it and we feel more disconnected, more sad, more frustrated about our life, right? Compared to somebody else's seemingly perfect life. So that's how we know, like, yeah, that strategy did not meet the need. So what can meet the need a little bit better? So it's a lot of trial and error of noticing, is this getting me closer to how I want to feel, or is this moving me further away?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned that comparison trap that we get into, that we feel the need that we have to do the hottest new fitness trend or the hottest new diet, which I know the dietitians will have a lot to say about that type of topic. Right. And I know we've got Vanessa coming up, and we may dive into that a little bit too. But I think we get caught up in what everybody else is doing, and we put the blinders on to what our needs are and what we specifically need to do to address those needs.
Absolutely. So pay attention, and you'll know if it's getting you closer or further away based on like, how are you feeling? How is your body feeling? Emotionally, how are you feeling? Is it getting you closer to what it is that you're after? And when we can recognize kind of some of those mile markers for ourselves, right? Getting us closer or further away, we have the power to like pivot, to change course and being like, yeah, I thought this was going to be helpful. It's actually not. So I got to try something else. And there is no shame in changing directions and trying something new.
Absolutely. So you kind of touched on quite a bit of research and some books and other resources and those types of things already, but what are some of the books, podcasts, websites, or other self-guided resources that you would recommend to listeners that may add more value to their lives?
Yeah. So besides the stuff that I've already mentioned, I love the self-compassion tools offered by Kristen Neff. That is one of my favorite tools to turn to when I am really in the midst of deep struggle. My guess is your guests have maybe mentioned these tools before, but this practice of self-compassion, allowing yourself to kind of emotionally be where you need to be and offering yourself kindness in the midst of that difficult thing is awesome. Same with Tara Brach. She is a meditation teacher, a psychologist, and offers a lot of self-compassion tools. I love the Greater Good Science Center. They're out of Berkeley, and they have got so much goodness. You pick a well-being topic, and they've got research to back it up, and ways to explore. So they've got a lot of really practical tools and practices that can assist in just overall well-being, kind of body, mind, and soul support that, like I said, has a lot of good research underneath it. And then, of course, I mentioned the nonviolent communication. That's a big one if you want to dive deeper into feelings and needs. And some of the other books, Dancing on the Tightrope, as well as Dr. Todd Kashdan's work of The Upside of Your Dark Side. If you want to really dive deeper into the power of anger, of jealousy, why some of those difficult, good feelings can be good for us, that's a great book, as well as his book Curious, which is all about the power of curiosity to help us when we are feeling stuck, and kind of seeing curiosity as a balm, a soothing balm that can really help us get from self-judgment into that bigger perspective of getting curious about something and moving through it. It's good stuff.
The Greater Good Science Center, that was one you tuned me into. And they have a really great podcast as well that I'll link in the show notes. That I highly recommend listening to, because each episode is about a specific practice that you can use. And so it's very, very helpful. And these episodes kind of come in smaller chunks too. So they're a great resource, something that I've used and listened to regularly.
Oh yeah. I can't say enough about their overall site. It's really good.
All right. So now it's time for your elevator pitch on the ways that people can dive on these topics or seek support with you and some of the programs and resources that you provide.
Ha, I love it. Here's my elevator pitch. 1, 2, 3, go. I think my work as a coach is really central to supporting people to get unstuck. So really helping them make inner changes so that they can have a bigger outer impact in their world, in their work, in their families. So I work with folks long-term as a health coach, anywhere from 4 to 8, sometimes 10 sessions, helping folks understand where their resistance is when they want to make a change, but another part of them also is really resistant and doesn't want to make a change. That's where I love to saddle up beside folks and really support them in kind of understanding that resistance and being able to kind of help bridge the gap from where they are feeling stuck to where they want to go. So that's where I use a lot of the tools we've talked about today. So that's coaching. I also teach this really fun 7-week class called Bend Don't Break. And it's all about resilience in helping ourselves kind of bend like a tree in a hurricane without totally getting uprooted and cracking in half. So we talk about really tangible tools that we can use to support ourselves with positive and negative emotions, engagement, healthy relationships, creating meaning when things are really hard, and achievement and accomplishment, helping people create habits that really last, and that go the extra mile when they need it the most. So those are the big pieces of things that I do. I also do 60-minute consults with folks. They're called Be Well Consult. And we can talk about anything well-being related. And so that's kind of a fun little thing that we talk for an hour and kind of get a little bit more clarity, a little roadmap of what people can do to experience more well-being in ways that are really customized to them.
And just to reiterate, what's the cost to our UK employees, retirees, and their spouses who take advantage of any of these?
It's free. It's free. It's free. It's free. It's shocking, right? Because clearly our services are worth tens of thousands of dollars, but it's free. So come on down, folks. We are here, and it's one of my favorite I think both Jackie Hansen and I, my colleague who also is a certified health coach, I think we've got some of the best jobs on campus, that we get to support faculty and staff and retirees to really care for themselves in the midst of some tough days.
Absolutely. Your all's passion for sure shines through just working with you all. And I feel like a program like Bend Don't Break is like this conversation, but so much more. I know how much work you've put into developing that program, and the amount of research that is behind that is incredible, and how useful that is for people.
Well, it really came out of working with folks and my own kind of nerdiness of loving all of the juicy research. But I realized the majority of people on the planet, are busy. This isn't what lights them up. So they're not going to be reading like the 30 books on brain science that I think are so fascinating, right? So Bend Don't Break really came out of me trying to synthesize the materials into small bite-sized pieces that people can take the research and use it in their daily lives without having to reserve 30 books from the library.
So final question, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this conversation?
Ooh. I would say that our feelings are not random, that they tell us about our core needs and desires, that our feelings carry wisdom and messages for us, so that when we can see them as messengers and offer them a seat at the table, we are less overwhelmed, we're less threatened, and we can get curious about what those messages, even on the most difficult feelings, what do they want to tell us? And I think it can totally be transformative, paying attention to our feelings and not just stuffing them and hoping that they're going to go away, because they're not. They're here because they want to help us use them and transform.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on the show and taking some time out of your day. I know we probably could have gone another hour and a half or 2 hours. We probably could have had a super episode if we wanted, but maybe I'll have you back on and we'll kind of dive into some of these other areas that we touched upon, but we didn't really go down that path because we didn't have the time for it. So I appreciate you bringing a lot of these up and getting people connected to more resources, whether those are internal or external, on this topic and the related topics.
You say the word and I'm there, in costume, guaranteed.
Well, thanks so much again.
Thanks, Jacob. Such a pleasure. Take care.
That's it for another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient. I hope you learned how to better identify your feelings and how to use that information to address any unmet needs you may discover. Coming up, we have quite a few programs our UK employees, retirees, and spouses might be interested in. First, another co-room mindfulness course will begin on January 21st. This 4-week online course will happen on Thursdays from noon to 1 and go through February 11th. January 21st is also the first day that UK Health Plan members can sign up for a community-supported agriculture voucher. With a CSA share, you'll receive fresh, local, organic produce weekly throughout the growing season. You can receive up to $200 off your CSA share by signing up. Additionally, I'll be joined by registered dietitian Vanessa Oliver in the next episode, and we'll be discussing CSAs, the voucher program, and the benefits of eating local as part of our conversation. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss that episode in February. Earlier in the episode, Amy mentioned practicing mindful self-compassion, and we have a course coming up on that as well. This course is a partnership between work life and health and wellness, and is being led by mental health clinician Eric Wilkinson and Jackie Carroll, my first guest on the podcast. This is a 4-week course and begins Friday, February 5th. It's also online and will run from 2 to 3 p.m. each of those weeks. Throughout February, Campus Recreation and Health and Wellness have partnered to offer a sleep challenge to UK faculty, staff, and students. By signing up, you'll be able to download and use an app called Sleep Rate. Sleep Rate normally costs $9.99 a month, but we're able to offer it for free. If you download the app and log 7 nights of sleep at any point in February, you'll be eligible for a prize drawing as well. Finally, coming soon are our new well-being check-ins. These 20-minute online appointments will enable you to get a snapshot of your overall well-being, including a review of a pre-completed questionnaire, support to consider your own sense of well-being, and a conversation about what's next. The first window of eligibility will include UK employees, and participants will be entered in a monthly drawing to win $200. 8 winners will be randomly chosen from the month they participated in. The best part about everything I've mentioned is that it's all free for UK employees, retirees, and their spouses. So be sure to check out the links in the show notes to learn more. And as always, listen through the outro to hear how you can connect with us on social media or send us an email if you have any topics you'd like to hear covered in the future. Wishing you all the best in 2021. Take care of yourself and others, and stay well. Thanks for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, a podcast series from University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. The UK HR Health and Wellness team, consisting of certified health coaches, fitness experts, registered dietitians, and wellness specialists, offer a wide range of online and in-person programming to University of Kentucky employees, retirees, and their spouses. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to future episodes wherever you find your podcasts. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching @UKY Wellness. There, you'll find links to episode show notes and more. You can also email healthandwellness@uky.edu with any questions or suggestions for future episode topics. To learn more about well-being benefits offered by University of Kentucky Human Resources, visit www.uky.edu/hr/wellbeing. Live well.